Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Just to expand on a couple of items. So the role of Overview and Scrutiny is to provide independent, critical friend challenge and to work with the Council's executive and other public service providers for the benefit of the public. The committee considers submissions from a range of sources and reaches conclusions based on the weight of evidence and not on party political grounds. Just to advise you that this meeting may be filmed for inclusion on the Council's website, and please note that other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of these images or recordings is not under the Council's control. On the first item, are there any apologies?
We have apologies from Laura Blumenthal, Chair, and Phil Cunnington is here as a substitute.
Okay, so thank you, Phil. Minutes of the previous meeting. This is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of November. Are there any observations about the minutes? Can
I just add that I missed Paul Fishwick off the attendance and I will add him in.
Thank you. Could I have someone to... I'm trying to look at. I'm having a bad night tonight. Proposal. Thank you very much. I do need these helps. I've got the right glasses, but the tongue's not working tonight. So could I have a proposal for the minutes, please? And a seconder? Those in favour? Thank you. Next thing is to ask us, a declaration of interest from anyone? Thank you. The next item is public question time. We have one public question. So this is Nick Dyer. If you please, could you ask a question? Thanks, Nick.
Good evening. The consultation on St Crispin states that the usage of the centre has declined 26% post-COVID, particularly among the over 60s. In a response to a Freedom of Information Act request, council officers gave the following figures for footfall at the centre as year ending March 19, 115,071, year ending March 20, 151,577, a spike coinciding with temporary closure of carnival pool facilities. Year ending March 21, 29,286, COVID affected. Year ending March 22, 72,785, COVID affected. And year ending March 23, 105,399, a reduction of less than 10% on the base year. How were these very, very precise footfall numbers calculated, and how was the age-related data collected?
Thank you, Nick. There's just an item in the question that I want to correct slightly, if I may. The figures that were quoted for the year March 19, that was the year that the contract was let. So there's 2 months of figures that you won't find in here. So this is a slightly shorter period. So there were slightly more people appeared in that year. And if I extrapolate that for the full 12 months, that's more like a 24% difference rather than a 10% difference. But that's just my rough calculation based on that. So the data is collected via the internal management system. All usage at St Crispin's Leisure Centre, including age profile, is captured on the contractor's data management system. Based on the question posed, officers are entirely confident with the data presented. Do you have a supplementary? Please.
I've spoken to members of clubs who use the centre, taekwondo, judo, badminton, racquetball, etc. And they are not required to individually check in at reception when attending their activities. And that's confirmed by St Crispin's staff who said they have no idea who is attending. I organise squash doubles sessions twice a week, and while I pay at reception, none of the other players is required to check in or recorded as being on the premises, and we're all over 60. As so many people's presence is unrecorded and no one is interrogated on their age, do you accept that the consultation was based on data that is inaccurate and understated?
Thank you, Nick. I can't actually answer that last part of the question because I don't know about the data being, as you say, probably understated. But it does worry me that in an area where there are school children, where there is a safeguarding issue, that there are people that are on site who are not registering that they're on site. that's another item that comes out of that comment that you've made. But what I will do is I will ask for a written answer, if I may, to fully answer your question. It'll be in the minutes, and we'll get that past you. Is that okay with you?
I'll have to accept that.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Thanks, Chairman.
I'm having a terrible day. This doesn't work. That doesn't work. So, yes, are there any members' questions?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so the main item for tonight then is the St Christmas Leisure Centre, and this is to consider an update report on the future of the Leisure Centre following the discussions at the committee's meeting on 14th of November, with additional information and additional invitees to give us some background. So I'd like to hand over to hopefully that will make it come up on the speaker. So I'd like to ask Pauline, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Given that we've all been through this paper once, I wonder if the people who are going to present could answer the questions that we asked at the previous meeting, which I recall were, why are we transferring this rather than giving the school exclusive use during the day? How is the support for evenings and holidays going to be managed if it is transferred? And also about strategic demand. I couldn't find the answers to those questions in the paper. Maybe I've missed them.
Pauline,
but maybe people could answer.
That's why we brought people in to answer.
Well, that's great. I just want to make sure we don't hear the same thing.
We're not, to say, I don't want to prejudge any content or leave out anything that was left from the last meeting. And admittedly, that has content relevant to what's happening today. And that's why I'd like to ask Graham if you could introduce and take the individuals through the process, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and I will try to avoid any repetition. But firstly, I would like to introduce some additional participants around the table who will be available to hopefully better directly answer some of your questions. As you'll appreciate, this is quite a complex issue where the council is only one of the partners, and we have other two key partners, and certainly I struggled to answer some of the questions because, of course, they would come from either the perspective of the Circle Trust, the school, or Places Leisure. And hopefully, by having additional contributors around this discussion, it will be more insightful and hopefully more reassuring to you in the answers to your questions. So I am delighted to say that to my left, we have Ginny, who's the Chief Executive of Circle Trust. We have Andy, who's the Head Teacher of St Crispin's. We have online, if you could just show yourself, Tony, if that's possible. Good evening. Hi, Tony. So Tony Penge is the Operations Manager for the Wokingham Borough Council Leisure Management Contract. We also have Peter Kilkenny to my right, who's our leisure consultant subject matter expert. We have Helen down the bottom there, our DCS, and Ming, the AD for this particular area, education and many other things besides. Also, from a political perspective, of course, there's Prue Bray with the lead member portfolio for education and Ian Shenton with the lead member portfolio for leisure. So I will do my best to try to steer your questions, given we have so many potential contributors. I'll do my best to steer your questions to the appropriate place, at least to start with. Okay. Right, the changes since the last meeting, if I can show you we'll take you to the supplementary papers. And we have page 7 on the supplementary papers. The only changes that have been made to the initial cover report that you received is that a new item, recommendation 10, has been added to reference the appendix, which is the business case effectively that's been pulled together pretty feverishly since we last met. You turn over the page 8, the only other adjustment I've made, they're both on page 8, is that the calculation of the footfall reduction using the data we've put into the business case is actually just over 30%. It's something like 30.4% and not 26%. So that was just a mathematical correction. And then the paragraph at the bottom of page 8 references the community and corporate overview and scrutiny committee considerations, both the other week and today, and that the chair will present the conclusions or the views of this committee at executive on the 28th of November. They are the only changes that have been made to the cover report. Of course, the detail has been collected and put together. Page 29, titled The Future Use of St Crispin's Leisure Centre. And that sets out all the additional work that has been undertaken since this committee last met. Okay, so they are the updates to the paperwork since we last met. What I'd like to first of all convey is what I consider to be the value for money case, because this is ultimately about us demonstrating we are making the right value for money consideration in the round, given that it will impact on parts of the community, people in the community in different ways. The summation of the value for money case is that the cost to Wokingham Borough Council is £1 million capital contribution, and it is only a contribution. It will not be the full cost. The residual will be covered by Circle Trust, but it's a £1 million capital contribution to secure additional school places. The asset value, which was asked at the last meeting and was referenced in the cover report but not quantified. The asset value of the site, if turned into residential, its highest possible value capital receipt use, would be in the region of £1.5 million as determined by our specialist surveyor. However, the reality of realising this 1.5 million is extremely remote given the planning considerations and restrictions that were detailed in the cover report and still appear in the cover report. So the reality of realising that capital receipt is extremely remote. And therefore, it states in the paperwork that the real business case is the community use. Now, one could say, well, surely it's the profit-making facility of opportunity of the leisure provision that we are losing. Well, that is not the case, because the leisure facility, as it stands, is not a profit-making activity. So already there is no profit being realised from that facility as a full leisure provision in the way it's currently provided. and therefore any variation to downsize it into a partial footprint or curtail its operations through block bookings, for example, to large block bookings to the school, will make it less commercially viable, and it's already not commercially viable. So the value in terms of it making an ongoing profit, there is none. It is not realising an ongoing profit. However, it does, of course, have a community value, and therefore, in reality, this site has a community value. And therefore, if the council protects its community use, it is not giving away its community value, whilst also securing the additional school places. Therefore, I'm surmising the cost or loss to the council as the £1 million contribution. The positive, or in terms of what the council is securing through its £1 million, is, whilst protecting its community use, it is securing 55 places over a projected 6-year period, equaling 330 places. The projections based on ONS data, census data, based on national pupil projection of school places and our internal school place planning methodology, which has been externally validated by experts, gives us no reason to think that we will not be needing those places over the next 6 years and indeed beyond. There is no logical reason to think that this school at this site, with its reputation and current demand expressed through preferences by parents, it is not logical or conceivable to think there will not be a need for an ongoing 55 provision of school places. So the other key consideration, of course, in terms of the impact on the community, is the impact on the users, which came out very clear at the last meeting of Scrutiny. We have gone through all of the users of the leisure centre, and we have worked with, obviously, Places Leisure, because it's through them that the users make their arrangements, their hiring arrangements. And we also have worked with Ginny from the Circle Trust perspective. And we can confirm that all of the community users outside the school hours can be accommodated in the same way that they are now. So all of those organisations that used St Crispin's, and they were out of school hours with one exception, will be able to continue to use that facility outside school hours. And that will be secured through the legal agreement we have with Circle Trust in the transfer of the asset. And that will complement and supplement the community activities already facilitated and enabled through Circle Trust in other parts of the building. There will also be a tranche of current users, more of a sports and leisure nature, that will be able to be accommodated through the other leisure sites offered by Places Leisure, obviously some in the near vicinity. And Tony has assured us in the same way that Ginny has, that those users too will be able to be accommodated in the near vicinity to their current locality. The one area where we will not be able to, under this proposal, will not be able to continue to accommodate, or the one area of usage, is that around squash usage during school hours. And we've undertaken a piece of work with Places Leisure to understand the number of membership or usage of squash users throughout using the squash facilities during the school day. And according to the data held by Tony, throughout the quarter of a year, there are only 11 users, separate users of the facility throughout a quarter of a year who would now have to use the squash courts outside of school hours or use a squash court in an alternative site, whether it's Wellington College or Berkshire Sports and Social Club or what have you. So what we're effectively comparing, I believe, through being able to accommodate in the way that I've conveyed, is we have on the upside, with the cost of £1 million, we have the ability to not just meet our statutory requirements of education provision, but obviously all that goes with that, the life opportunities, impact on families, etc., around meeting our statutory provision of school places for 55 children, at least 6 years, almost certainly beyond, versus the disbursement of, say, 11, maybe 15, who book the squash courts during school hours. Furthermore, it's worth recognising that those that do book through in school hours also book outside of school hours as well. So there is not on the records and the data we have received, there is not a single member that only exclusively books and uses within school hours. So just before I move on and introduce others, particularly I want to introduce Helen, and of course everyone is around the table ready and prepared and eager to answer questions and explain the case. But before that, I do that, I would want to just pick up on a few additional points that I haven't covered, or make it clear that we have had additional questions that have come to us outside this meeting, and I think I've covered quite a few of those off. What I just want to highlight in addition then is, in the business case, we did spend quite a bit of work at looking at the hybrid options, which we've introduced as 3A, 3B and 3C. 3A and 3B speak very strongly to the fact that it isn't a viable leisure proposition already, I would say, and therefore 3A and 3B makes it even less viable. Another point has been raised about the genuine need, and I think we can go into that further. I've talked about the data, the methodology, and I want to hand over to Helen from a statutory DCS perspective in a minute to go further through the overall need and why we think St Crispin's meets that overall need in terms of the role St Crispin plays in meeting that need. And I also have been given a question around social value, and I haven't introduced that into my calculations. I think it's a spurious accuracy to introduce social value into a calculation. But what I would say is we land up comparing the disturbance, disruption, inconvenience of a small cohort of squash players having to find a different time of day or a different facility to undertake their activities versus the provision of education places for our community. That's the social value consideration, and that's a political consideration, not one I want to attach pounds and pennies to. But I think that is the crux of the social value weighing. On the one hand, we've got the education place, on the other hand, we've got some disturbance of education, sports and leisure activities. So I think that probably covers off all I need to, and I think that's probably more than enough. I'm sure you would agree that's more than enough, and you want to hear from someone else. So I'll hand over to Helen, but of course, like I say, all contributors around the table are keen to help.
Thank you, Graham, and good evening, everybody. I'm going to speak through the lens of children in the statutory role that I have as Director of Children's Services. And in that role, I carry specific responsibilities to ensure that every child of school age has access to quality educational provision. Graham has already highlighted that the Council has a statutory duty to provide a school place for every child in the borough whose parents require a school place or want a school place. I think everyone around the table knows that we've had huge pressures following population growth in the borough, and there's been very limited capacity to meet the Council's statutory duty, specifically in relation to secondary school places. So in this academic year, 23-24, we had 49 children with no offer at year 7. So this was immediately a point of offer day. And Wokingham Borough Council was one of 13 councils nationally that came to the attention of the Secretary of State for being unable to offer a school place for every child. And this caused, we know because we took the calls relating to this, for those children and those families, that caused quite significant distress and upset, and particularly so for a child not knowing where they're going to be educated. Now, Graham's highlighted already that school place sufficiency forecasting for Wokingham indicates that we have a shortage in total of 1,045 year 7 places in secondary schools over the next 5 academic years. And Graham has already highlighted that we've scrutinised, we've challenged our forecasting model, and this has been externally verified. We absolutely must provide quality school places, and if we have insufficient school places for children, we will have to send children out of the borough to the nearest schools with places, or by providing additional classrooms, which could be put up jobs, neither of which is ideal for children. And as Graham has said, we're forecasting that the population growth of the borough will continue, and we will have that continued need for expansion. I would like to highlight that we've worked very well with senior school leaders across the borough in a very strategic way to address the deficits that we have in school places. But St Crispin's School in particular has been able to offer approximately 330 year 7 places. St Crispin's would be unable to take students without the use of the leisure centre to create additional classroom capacity. And these places at St Crispin's are crucial in meeting demand and fulfilling our statutory responsibilities for children having an absolutely quality and suitable school place. So I'll leave it there for now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Pauline, do you want to Please, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. Very useful extra information. I just wanted to ask, you said at one point you said could, and another point you said would provide facilities outside the school hours for people like squash players and other sports players. I wondered if it was a would or whether it was a could. And if so, if it is a would, which is great, how long that would be for?
So this is those that fall under the community use. So we've provided a schedule, identified the more directly sports and leisure ones, and then the community use. Shared that with Tony and with Ginny, and Ginny, of course, is here to answer directly. But Ginny has come back and said all can be accommodated with the exception of squash during school hours, and that would be secured through a legal agreement in the lease transfer to Circle Trust.
So I think, just to be clear, my question was, is it can or will, and for how long?
The answer would be will, and it will be part of the ongoing lease transfer.
So duration?
It will be the length of the lease.
Okay,
so,
thank you. That's great. Thank you very much, Graham.
David.
Chair, thank you. And thank you to Graham and everybody else for the extra information that's come forward this evening. I think, as I said at the last meeting, it's worth repeating. It's a great matter of regret that we didn't lead with the need for the extra school places originally, and we got kind of sidetracked into the viability of the leisure centre. If this had been a proposal to increase places, for example, at Bohum, which I know Councillor Margett supports as well as I do, we wouldn't be too worried about the business case. We'd be demanding to have those places on the table immediately. So I welcome the proposal to expand the school, and I totally endorse what Helen has said about the need to provide places for parents. So for me, the question here never was about the business case for expanding the school. It's far more about how do we protect the community assets that are at risk as a result of that. I was going to ask the same question as Councillor Jorgensen about the difference in tone, which I noticed in some of the written report here, again, where there's some vague thoughts about it could, it might, it should, versus the statements in the business case, which are far more specific. And I welcome that, and I hope that the community will welcome that as well. Two specific questions. We talked originally about the use of the community centre at Montague Park, and then there's, I think on page 10 here, there's the agenda, it talks about subject to a viability assessment. We managed to cost out the option of refurbishing the gym or the leisure facilities at the school, which we're not going to do, but that was going to be about £1 million. And I'm wondering how we got to that huge figure ahead of working out what it would cost to put a few Pilates classes up at Montague Park, which I would have thought would be far easier to cost out. So I'd like some clarity on what we're going to do about Montague Park. But while I note your comments there, Graham, about this will be part of the ongoing legal agreement with the school, we have other examples across the borough, which again, a number of us spoke about last time, where leisure facilities coexisting with school premises have not always been a happy marriage. Again, Bohunt School comes to mind, but there are a number of others. Schools always have this trump card called safeguarding to play whenever things get tough. So I think a further comment on how this actually does get maintained and some kind of rowing back on this down the road would be appreciated.
Okay, of course I'll bring Ginny in because it's better you hear directly from Ginny rather than through me. But from the council's perspective, there will be a legal agreement in place as we transfer the asset, and with that will come expectations. Obviously, both parties will need to sign such a document. It needs to be signed from both sides, which obviously brings me neatly over to Ginny to give her perspective as the other party into this contract.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for letting me have a moment of your time. I'm overly excited about this piece of equipment, and I'll try and calm down about that. It's really impressive, isn't it? I guess the most important thing that I wanted you to know and know very publicly is that The Circle Trust is a charity. It's an education charity. It exists to do one thing, which is to promote education for the public good. But that is not enough. We have a desire to be a civic contributor. It's really important. We are a trust that is for Wokingham, in Wokingham. And nobody has to persuade me in the room how important it is to play our part in the community. And so, although there might be a lease to sign, I have to tell you, it is welcomed. We would not possibly want to displace people who are very much part of our community that we serve. Of course, it's a bit regretful about using the word trump card when it comes to safeguarding. And I get where that comes from. I totally understand that. But please, I hope I can only persuade you that I would never want to use it as a trump card to be mean or to stop. But I do have a legal responsibility for the safety and well-being of children, and you would want me to discharge that. But I would never use it as a trump card. In terms of the community, I was for many years the head teacher at St Crispin's, and the location of it is just delightful, isn't it? It's right in the middle of the town, and I understand why it's so important to people, and I would not want to change that.
Thank you, Jenny. If you want to just respond, and then I'll...
Yeah, so I asked a question about the community centre at Montague Park. Graham, where we are with that?
Yeah, we haven't been able to progress that in the same way as we've attended to all the other aspects that we have. And it will depend on, well, first of all, the reassurance of what would be continued with Circle Trust, and the reassurance of what would be able to be provided for by Places Leisure is a key component of that. So we need to determine if there are, and to what extent there are needs that are not being met that could be addressed through a venue like Montague Park. And that's all I could really say at this stage.
Before the questions disappear away from the topics, Marie-Louise.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's really nice. I mean, it's good and important to hear about the commitment of the Circle Trust, and anybody who has expressed concerns about this plan is not doing it from a position of being anti-school places. I'm sure everybody around this table is aware of what we're doing, you know, or anti the school. You know, many of my residents hold it in, you know, extremely high esteem. So I don't want us to get into this sort of pattern where we're saying it's one or the other. And if you're supporting like two teams, you know, if you're talking about the leisure centre, you're somehow being opposed to the idea of quality places for children. Yeah, I mean, that is a false distinction, which I don't think anybody is seriously making. I would ask about the enforcement of this agreement. Yeah, because I've seen in my time, you know, many warm words and partnership agreements kind of disappear. Yeah, as time changes in personnel, more financial pressures that are placed on, you know, both parties, and we know those are going to continue, you know, so I would be interested to hear about what the enforcement pattern is, or what the enforcement structure is. The second is about how such an agreement would survive. You know, 125 years is a long time, 10 years is a long time. If the Circle Trust transitions into ownership by another entity, would this kind of, you know, local community focus that we've talked about today survive that? And how, you know, how would it survive it? And I'd also like to raise the issue that we're not just talking about the continuation of existing community activities at the centre, at the leisure centre. Yeah, we're also talking, when we talk about its future, we're talking about the potential loss, or the loss of potential community engagement, like new activities, new forms of community activity that might have been put into that place. Where are they going to go? Yeah. Is there going to be, what kind of interest, what kind of support is there going to be for new things to come? Continuation is one thing, but that can raise the issue that we're just like, waiting them out. Yeah. But so what about the potential for the future? And it is not, just to say, it is not about, this idea of we're separate, we're choosing one or the other. Both of these matters, like the provision of school places and the existence of a centre, which is a much loved, strongly supported community asset, not just, I should say also for in terms of a few squash players, there's also a large number of older residents who use the Shine facilities currently, or the seated exercise, or the range of exercises that are currently offered, who have said quite clearly that they will not take exercise in the future if that is not, if it's not available at St Crispin's. So, we got that from the consultation. We should take that on board. But again, it's not a question of one or the other. Or I'm not sure that it's fair to present it in this kind of totally bifurcated state. But those three questions about the sort of the enforcement, how it would survive a transition, and about potential new community uses.
Okay, do you want me to? Yeah, I'm sorry about this, but I've got to say that the decision we face is about whether we secure additional educational places. We don't have an awful lot of choices, and certainly to meet our statutory need in a timely way, we have extremely limited choices, and certainly in a cost-effective way, because accommodating anywhere else around the borough could be up to £8 million, as stated in the paper. So a modular needed would be £5 to £6 million plus the infrastructure if it's not an easy connection. So I'm afraid that is the real choice that the council is facing. So I apologise if it comes over a bit alarmist and stark, but that is the decision the executive is going to have to consider. Does it meet its urgent statutory places in borough, or at the expense of the disturbance described, or does it potentially jeopardise its position in running into meeting school places with a deficiency of of provision, and maybe having to seek supply outside of the borough is an option. But I'm afraid it is the position presented to executive is that stark. Around enforcement, it's a legal contract, and our head of legal says, well, it's like any other contract, it's enforceable, and there'll be financial penalties and all sorts, just like any other contract that's not met. There will be terms of enforcement. I'm sure, certainly with the words Jenny's given, we'd never come close to that. But like you say, personnel or indeed organisations can change. But that would be a legal contract, and we would enforce the council's community rights, or it's owned by our community, so we'd enforce our rights. And if there was a change, that would have to be undertaken through the DfE's replacing of arrangements or supervision arrangements, and we would obviously work with DfE on clearly the contract that's in place. So we would expect, if such a thing arose, then and there was a new incumbent then occupying our asset under that lease, we would seek the same arrangements and obviously strongly enforce that with the DfE. That would be our expectation. As to the future potential offerings, and I can't speak for Tony and Jenny, of course, but there are assets that are able to be used more fully, both outside of St Crispin's in other facilities, and indeed the asset transfer will, I'm sure, give opportunities for a consideration of greater community use. And all I can say is I would, because it's a hiring out of, it creates income, doesn't it, to pay for your running costs and fixed costs and what have you. So I would just say, why wouldn't they want to? And I saw Ginny was nodding, but obviously it's better for Ginny and Tony to respond to that. And like I say, the Montague Park option is not ruled out, but we just need to understand what the usage would be and what the financial impact would be on the council in making that happen, and if indeed it could incorporate other potential council service provision there as well.
Thank you, Graham. I think you've got something to offer for this as well.
What I'm hearing from you, Mary, is you're looking for reassurance. That's it, really. You're not looking to be a blocker or anything. You're just looking to make sure that we try to keep as much community use as we can, and that will continue. So I think you've heard from Graham about the contract. There are processes for transferring trusts and things. We hope the Circle Trust will continue for many years to come, but if it doesn't, we can transfer the same conditions to somebody else who's running it. And obviously over time, things would evolve anyway. So I can't imagine that in 50 years we'll want the same things as we have now. But for the foreseeable future, I think we've got a way forward. What Graham didn't mention is on page 35, where it talks about opportunities in other sites. So Places Leisure are looking, they've got this smaller facility at what was called Box Fit, but it's BXG Fit now, which is a smaller thing where they could transfer some classes to, and they're quite happy to look at that. And that strikes me as something that would suit the people that don't want that high-tech, loud, having to park in the Carnival Wall car park experience. It's also quite close to St Crispin's. It's in Peach Place, and it's on that bus route that goes past St Crispin's, so the same sort of people will be able to get there. And I think Tony may want to say something about himself, but I think that's a reasonable alternative to having the daytime classes that they'd have to move somewhere else. They don't all want to go in Carnival Hub, and we know that there's a residual number of people who wouldn't want to go there. But I think Graham's answered the other bit. I'm sure Ginny would agree with that if there's any times outside school hours where there's no activities and people want to have activities, then I'm sure the school will be only too happy to arrange it because it will bring them income. And that's quite a useful thing for them to have, as well as being of benefit to the community. So I'm pretty sure that we can accommodate just about everything.
So I think, Chairman, it'd be helpful if we heard from Ginny to talk from the Circle Trust perspective around that question, and then Tony, who's just appeared on screen, and then if we then go and pick up the Shine question raised as well, because Peter wants to come in on that.
Peter, you'll be third rather than first.
Please check whatever's.
Go to Ginny first.
Well, I get to use the microphone again. It is absolutely the case that St Crispin's School, because of its location, is constantly hired now. So the school hall, the drama studio, the gym. Actually, we run out of space to hire because we have always understood the privilege of the location in the middle of the town and the convenience for the community. It's only right to hire. Right alongside that, of course, is a responsibility to use public money carefully, sensibly, and be the highest steward of everything we've got. And so it is absolutely the case. Not only do I really welcome innovation and new activity, I would really want it, because the trust would be taking on additional costs and responsibilities. And naturally, the trustees have had to highly consider whether that is acceptable. So it's the looking after of a building that will always have needs, as many of the school estate has, and making sure that the building pays for itself in that sense. But I will just go back to that civic duty. It's called a civic duty, but it's actually a civic desire. The reason we created the trust was to make sure that we had deep links in Wokingham. I understand that the education landscape has changed dramatically, and that's always rather uncomfortable for people, isn't it? But you know what? Schools in Wokingham, schools in anywhere, are anchors. They're anchors of communities. And the best thing I can do for Wokingham, the best thing I can do for the people of Wokingham is run really good schools, because they really attract people. They really give the security, the well-being, the happiness. They're full of teenagers, and that's always rather trying on occasion, but they're joyful and they're the future, and that's a good thing. I shouldn't go on, but I just want to give a sense of our feelings, because I accept that you will have people who will say nice words here. But I can only say that I have been part of this community for 14 years. I am not somebody who've only just come overnight, and I hope that my record and the record of the schools for which I am responsible and wholly responsible talks for itself.
So if Tony can come in from Places Leisure perspective around that offering.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Yeah, just to sort of reiterate the point Prue just made, we've now been running the BHG Fit in Peach Place for a couple of months now, and we have, used that already to engage with local organisations, voluntary groups, and that space is becoming more and more popular for the type of groups of people who don't want to engage in, the big leisure centre. So we believe that facility will definitely fill some of the void that may be created. I think the second point, and Graham, I think you touched on the social value. Again, obviously, by the majority of the bookings transferring or staying with the school out of their hours, the social value will still continue. So there'd only be a very, very small loss potentially of social value.
Yeah, and then thanks, Tony. If we can then bring in Peter to address the Shine question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just to give some reassurance, really, to the member, Chair. The Shine programme has suffered quite a significant decline during the last 18 months post-COVID. We will be taking the opportunity as a result of this potentially to relaunch that. So people will be accommodated, but I absolutely understand the concerns if people don't want to exercise at the new carnival, as Tony's described there. So we are working pretty extensively with places to make sure that group as such can be accommodated, because it's a crucial component of our programme. And that's the over 55s programmes, Chair. So just to give you that reassurance, really. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I hope your questions aren't disappeared out the window because the topic's moved on, but Charles, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I had two questions. First of all, about school places, which is conversations with Ming last week about where the borough's need is greatest. He told me it was Shinfield, parts of Lower Earley, and Wokingham Without and Finch Hampstead to a lesser degree, but the Wokingham Town and Winner schools have more places than there are children. So my question here is basically driving it. We're being asked whether this is the right place to expand, but we've already got spare capacity in the centre of Wokingham. Now, I understand there's a strategy for the whole of the borough coming in January. And the first part of this question is, would it not make sense to actually hold this back until we can see where it fits in with the wider strategy? And I understand you mentioned earlier that, or Graham mentioned actually, there were 49 kids who did not get an offer last year. I'd like to, where were those 49? Where are they based from?
Chairman, it's best, I think, that Ming and Helen respond to this in the first instance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You want me to respond? Yeah, in terms of whether we expand in the right place or not, I understand that your question, Councillor. When we make decision whether we should expand, where to expand, we need to take into account, number one, Trust Chief Executive and Helen Cathleen, we need to provide quality school places. We just not just talk about school places, and also whether the trust agree to expand or not. And the third factor, whether they can expand or not. We have searched and explore whether any existing school in the area just mentioned, Councillor, to the school locally there can be expanded or not. Number one, they want the opportunity to expand further. Number two, they didn't offer it great number to be expanded. So we were grateful the school, which currently provide high quality education, actually offer to say that we can offer more space. But space, let's space actually more than what the maximum per number that published pupil number. So that means they need to create more teaching space, not necessarily classroom. When I say not necessarily classroom, can be indirectly create places, and then in the main side, you can have more classroom. So to answer the question, a certain factor decide where in working a small place, they aren't that many opportunity to expand. Let's resolve our immediate median issues, operational challenge, which Carol just quoted. Actually, initially, we will have more than 300 place shortage. And then through partnership, which I would like to emphasize is, partnership is really, really important here. Not only Ginny, I realize that Ginny offers great, I think many other secondary school teachers, they really want to contribute, including the school in the area you mentioned. We just need to take into the reality whether they can be expanded or not. I think to answer that's the first question, why we chose to expand in the area. Probably they already have sufficient places. And the people actually from other part, they can easily travel into the places we expand. We already take into account all those factors.
Sorry, sorry.
What was something else? Because I think you referred to the surplus places in Woking Town. It doesn't work like that, because people don't go to their nearest school. They go to the schools that their parents apply for them to go to. So it's all about parental choice. And I believe I'm right in saying that St Crispin's is well oversubscribed in preferences, and therefore there is pressure for places at that school. And because people apply for it, that seems a logical place to provide the places. It may not always be the best geographically, but then our schools are not perfectly aligned with our housing either. So there are limited opportunities, exactly as Ming described. You have to have a willing trust. You have to have a site that's capable of doing this, and you have to have pay attention to what parents actually want and where they want their children to go. And we're very fortunate that we have a number of schools who've stepped up to offer us places for next year. So it's not just all about St Crispin's. We've also got offers from other schools, including Forest, including Bullmash and Piggott. And then next year, we've got more schools offering places to fill the continuing shortfall. So we're going for wherever we can get them, wherever people are willing. I think Helen may know some information about the 49 children, but my recollection is they were from all over the place, because it depended on where they'd applied and how popular those schools were, whether they got in. I hope that makes sense.
Please, Ming,
And what Councillor Bray just said, apart from sufficiency, what really important to us, I'm sure important to remember as well, parents' choice. Every time, I think when I look at our performance, apart from whether we feel school place or good parent places or not, we talk about quality places, that means parent choice. Actually, one are doing quite well this year in a very, very difficult circumstances through the strong partnership with head teacher. Actually, this year we improved the rate of parents who got their first three choices which is difficult because when you have a charge of places, you have to place it anywhere, whether they like it or not. So that's something I have to share with the member, and that's very important for us, and link to quality of education. You may have places, but parents don't want the children to go to school. That can be another challenge for us.
Thank you, Chair. If I can come back on that briefly.
Please, Charles.
Will the consequence of this mean, though, it's going to mean more buses bringing more children across Woking in the morning, logically?
Anything we do means that. I think is that we've got more children. Our schools, as I described, are not where the children are, and people are allowed to choose where they send their child. So we do have a very strict home to school transport policy. In mainstream, actually, the increase is only slight in the cost of mainstream school transport. The main increase is in SEND. And that is ballooning out of all. It's the same in all councils up and down the country. So I think that's right, isn't it, Helen? Yes. It's we're looking all the time at what we can do about the mainstream things, but we have strict criteria. So you're not eligible unless you live more than 3 miles away as the crow flies. And we offer places, spare places on buses to people if they want to purchase them to try and save on transport. And we're trying as well to do active travel, so to encourage more children to cycle where it's safe and to walk to school. But it's one of those difficult things. But the real problem with the home to school transport is in the SEND side, and that will gradually be addressed as we get more SEND provision in the borough.
Thank you, Drew. Norman.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back on one of the things that you said, Graham, which was about the profitability of the St Crispin's Leisure Centre. I mean, you said today that the leisure centre was not operating profitably. Last time we asked you, a couple of weeks ago, you said you couldn't work that out because it was wrapped up in the overall contract. Just wonder if you can unravel that for me, please.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different things. So one is what the particular site, in terms of the particular site, is it making a profit or a loss? And I said that it's not a profit-making facility, and I don't want to go into more detail because of obvious commercial sensitivities. What I was saying is it's hard to tell across the whole of the contract, whereby Places Leisure make a very sizable contribution to the council, what the closure of this facility would do in the round to the overall management fee payment, because of all the fluidity, not just around if there was closure at St Crispin's, then classes or membership would increase in other Places Leisure facilities, but also the additional offerings like box fit, for example, what that would do. So it's a fluid moving picture, which I said was hard to quantify and would evolve over time, and therefore I couldn't say what the specific impact of this decision would be, other than that it would be dealt with through the equalisation fund in all the swings and roundabouts and other technicalities. Not the swings and roundabouts is overly technical, but you get my drift. It's a fluid moving picture that I am not predicting it will result in a revenue growth pressure to the council, and will be managed in the round, and there will be ups and downs.
Okay, thank you. I mean, my understanding, though, was that this whole process was driven by trying to get something arranged with the school rather than Places Leisure coming and saying, we don't want to run this facility anymore. Is that correct?
Well, the whole process is set out in the executive paper that kicked off the consultation process. So I'll just refer you to that paper.
I mean, it doesn't answer the question, but I mean, it seemed before the consultation started, the The rumour mill was very much about transferring the facility to the school. I mean, that was clear that that was on the table as a possibility. So I really just trying to drive at, I don't see that there was a drive from Places Leisure to dispose of this facility as far as the contract was concerned. That was all I was driving at, really.
Not sure if there's anybody who can answer that, but other than my view,
I don't think there is necessary to answer that, no.
If I could just give my view on that particular.
Can I just ask another question? I mean, we're talking about the sort of hybrid structure again. I'd still have a concern about transferring such an important asset from the council to another body, even under a lease. So just again, going through the possible hybrid structure where the council retains the asset and has a contract for the school to use it during the day and a contract for Places Leisure to run it the rest of the time. Why is that not a sensible option?
Sorry, Graham, just a moment. Sorry, I'd take us back to Nick last week when at the end of the meeting we voted down the other options. The only two options we're considering is the transfer or the retention. The other options that were on the table in front of us, we actually took a vote on.
This hybrid option was not on the table last week.
It's in there.
The hybrid option was not on the table last week. It was an extra one that we brought up.
And it's in the business case, so obviously it was being considered because it's option 2B.
It was considered because you raised it. Yep. And
It's a legitimate question.
It's a legitimate question, but if you read 2A, hybrid use, it is ruled out by both the school and Places Leisure, so it's never going to work.
Yes, Chairman, if it's okay. You're right, Chairman. To begin with, we were on option 1 and 2, and towards the end of the discussion, the exploring the hybrid options was raised and supported as something worthwhile doing, which is why we introduced the option 3A, B and C in the additional paperwork. I suppose just first of all, touching base with what's the driver. I think the driver to this is what's the best use of this asset for the community. And that should always be our questions about everything, our limited resources, our limited assets, what have you. What is the best possible use for our community? And that's the beginning of this, recognising there are different things we could do with it. As for the hybrid options, we looked at two. Initially, the block booking one, whereby Places Leisure occupy in the way they do now, and they block book out to schools, was looked at, but also then maybe a more radical, well, let's carve the building into two parts, one where the school has just enough space to do what they have to do and give as much to Places Leisure to run a reduced site. I think it's probably worth getting Tony to explain why, from Places Leisure's perspective, that wouldn't be a viable option. Tony, is that possible?
Yes, yes, it is, Graham. So the proposal, obviously, to split the site and the plans the school have got where the new classrooms would be, takes out the gym, and clearly in any sort of leisure facility, the gym is the main driver in terms of income. So by taking that out, that would pretty much leave us with 2 squash courts and 4 badminton courts as a business, and that clearly just isn't viable.
Sorry, and Tony, the block booking whereby you occupy the site as you do, but you block book it out to schools for all of the school's needs.
So again, in terms of running that facility, post school and evenings, again, there was no viability with it. Just the income doesn't add up, and the operational challenges that we then would have taking taking it back from the school at the end of the school day, and then managing it for a limited time during the evening, then handing it back to the school again, ready for their school day. Just operationally, that just wouldn't work definitely for us, and I'm sure Ginny would probably agree with that as well.
So if I can just follow up on that, the under the hybrid use block booking on page 34, it says that it was also not accepted by the school because it would not address the long-term expansion. I just wonder what's behind that. Can you just explain that, please?
I think it's worth reminding people that the school has a block booking of a majority of the sports centre between 8 and 5 every day of the school term. And one of the things that we have always been ambitious about, and I think that's probably the right word, is that we have two worries. One is health and safety, and one is, forgive me, safeguarding. So you heard earlier tonight, there are many adults who come quite rightly, as they are entitled, onto the shared site who don't sign in. And therefore, the cost of the additional staffing that the school has to put in to ensure the safety of children is quite considerable. And to reduce that to better use is good. Secondly, the site is busy, and we all know what London Road is like and the movement of cars and so on. And I have to tell you that there was a very near fatal accident with an adult driver who misjudged the accelerator and the brake. And if you know, there is a sort of mound between the two car parks, a grassed mound. And so fast did they travel that they actually marooned the car on the top. If I tell you that I have never genuinely been so terrified in my life, because I actually watched it, and not 15 minutes before we had had all of the children of the primary schools come onto the site to hear an author read. So we could have had an absolutely tragic moment. To share the space is really operationally so uncomfortable and difficult for both parties that we simply would not want to continue to do that. And I hope that sort of set out that sort of our main worries, but also hopes that we might be able to improve the situation.
Thank you. Peter. Please, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to understand. I don't understand why you're sharing it if you've got a block booking. It's not a block booking then, is it?
Yes, it's an excellent question. It's the complication of the building. So we have the sports hall and some of the corridors that get you to the sports hall, but none of the changing rooms. And what that means is that we have to use classrooms on the main site to have children change in order to do their sport. If we had a block booking, it would still prevent the use of classrooms being realised in the building, which means we could not take the additional pupils.
So maybe I can explain what we were talking about when we were talking about the block booking at the committee you weren't at. What we were talking about was essentially a block booking that covered the whole facility for the period the school was open. So not having to share anything with anybody during the period the school's open, which means that you that shouldn't have the same problems. The only disadvantage you might have is that the bit that you've got to convert to classrooms, which I think was the weight studio, would not any longer be available to Tony outside hours because you can't move equipment like that backwards and forwards. But I think when we were talking about block bookings, we were thinking of, here you are, this is yours during the day, during the evening, Tony manages it, he gets the revenue from you for that block booking, and in the evening it's down to him to raise money and in the school holidays. That's what we're thinking of.
Sorry, I'll keep pushing the button wrong. I understand that would not be of interest to the trust.
And why is that?
It's because we would only continue the existing complication now. So at 5 o'clock, we have to exit the building. But activities for young people obviously go on. It is uncomfortable to do that. We would need to use the entirety of the building and convert it for the proper use of teenagers, not be tenants in a building that is designed for something different.
That comes to my question then about how you would then provide the service you've effusively said you were going to provide. If you're now saying actually you don't want to do that, essentially, I think. Have I misunderstood?
I don't know whether you've understood or I've not been clear. Possibly both. I don't know. Isn't it just, everyone? So at the moment, the building is designed for the main purpose of doing leisure and the gym and so on. The activities that we would continue to run are mainly in the sports hall, which would be unaffected, and the squash court, that would be unaffected. So everything that we've said that we can continue is absolutely easily done by those would be the areas that would be unchanged. I don't know whether if I can suggest the head teacher, St. Crispin's, add to that.
So just in that case, then, what are you saying that you would like to run on past 5 o'clock? So
I'm so sorry, I can't hear you very well.
You said that the school would like to run on past 5 o'clock. So what facilities would you be using if you were still making these facilities available to other people?
If it's okay, could I invite the head teacher, St. Crispin's, to add?
Sure.
Thank you very much. Just to answer your question in part, I think at the moment we're very much in a position where we're making do without the extra facilities that we need for young people. And so we find ourselves in a position where we have been lessoned in the libraries or in the main hall that would be much better suited to being either in classrooms or indeed in the sports hall. With the great help of the local authority and also the leisure providers at the moment, we have taken block bookings to camp in the leisure centre, particularly for exams, because as the school has already grown over the last 3 years, we've needed to set out 250 desks and chairs, which isn't very practical taking in and out each night. And so we have a need not only for that kind of facility to be able to camp in the leisure centre, but also to change some of its arrangements and what the rooms do, but also then to make use of things such as the changing rooms as well, because it is a real restriction on the curriculum, because we can only do so much PE at a certain time, and then that restricts other subjects when they can be as well. And we can't unpick a little bit of the curriculum and unpick a little bit on other facilities, because we're making do with staff doing other things with students, not necessarily getting the very best that we want to do with the whole facility of the sports centre.
I think that answered the question. Sorry. So what facilities would you use in the evening that you can't use at the moment? That's the question.
To be able to camp there with the exams is one example.
So, sorry, you just said that you would allow community usage in the evening. How can you do that if you're camping in it during exams?
It's already happening, Pauline. That's already part of what happens already, that there are weeks in the year where it's not available for anybody because of the exams.
Chair, it's about 11 weeks in total.
So if I may make a comment in there, my understanding of this is that there are going to be occasions, and there are occasions already, where the facility that as a centre isn't available for leisure because it's needed for the school, it's needed for exams, etc. And that already exists, so there's no change in that. It's not as if there's a commitment to release that facility for additional time. And that, yes, there are occasions when there will be extracurricular activities that go on in the school when they're going to want to use the facilities. That's again, so it is a balancing act. And it's not something, I don't think that this committee could actually get a real figure and turn around and say, at the end of this day, here's a spreadsheet, you're going to have these many hours, you're going to have these many hours. I don't think we're going to achieve that. But it is something that in the process of whatever's decided, that is dealt with. The other side is, if I get my head around this properly, is that the proposal of transferring the asset releases 2 existing classrooms that are being used for changing rooms. So that it's an instant gain of 2 classrooms in the main school, because the changing facilities will now be, the school will be able to use the change facilities in the main hall. The only thing, the main thing that tells that use at the moment is the fact that there are squash courts that the school may not be using that are open for the adults to use. So now you've got a mixed environment of adults and children in changing rooms, which you cannot have. So we've got those elements that we've got to balance into this thing. So I do understand exactly where everybody's coming from, and it is going to be a very fine balance. But,
sorry, I might be being really thick here. I probably am, but I don't understand why, if you gave the school, if you gave the school a block booking for the school day, plus the evenings when they've got essentially block bookings at the moment because they've got the whole hall, and therefore they could use the whole hall during the exam period exactly as they have at the moment, plus they use the whole school during the day and therefore have access to the changing rooms. I can't actually see the difference between that and transferring the asset, that's all.
please.
Sorry, I'll just try and sort this out for you, Pauline. I think Places Leisure have said it is not commercially viable for them to only be left with that bit. And that's why that cannot possibly work.
That's assuming the school isn't paying for it, I think. So that's probably the...
It isn't. Well, where would the school get the money to pay for enormous amounts of work? So Places Leisure cannot offer proper leisure offering, and Tony's on there, if they haven't got things that they can't, like the gym that's disappeared out from under them.
Chair, can I just add to that? For example, a really good example is the multi-site operations around promotions and gym memberships. So you are massively restricted if it essentially, and as Tony's alluded to, it's a 5 o'clock operation. And operationally, that is extremely challenging. For any duty management arrangements, operational challenges, it's just not viable.
Let me explain the reason for my concern. The reason for my concern is if the Places for Leisure can't operate it in the evening because it's not economically viable, I'm really concerned that it's going to put a huge onus on the school to operate it during the evening. Their cost base is probably higher than Places for Leisure, I would expect. And they're also going to have the cost of operating it during the summer. And I'm worried that they're going to enter into a contract that they can't fulfill because it's going to cost them a fortune during the evening, which Places for Leisure already said isn't economical. And also it's going to cost them during the summer. And that's what's worrying me.
Tony's got his hand up, Chairman. I know you probably can't see behind you.
Sorry, Tony, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think the point is, again, if there's 2 organisations involved, as it may be, us running at evening weekends, then there's 2 organisations opening and closing the building, and operationally that just doesn't work and couldn't. I just can't see how it would work in terms of responsibility.
The school could answer the other question, because that's legit. I mean, either Places for Leisure could operate it all the time and let it to the school during the periods the school needs it, or vice versa. But each way, somebody's going to have to man it in the evenings and over the school holidays, and they're going to have that onerous burden, which Places for Leisure have just said isn't viable. And I'm wondering how the school's going to afford it.
You'd like to answer? Please do. Thank you.
You're right, it's a huge responsibility. It's the balance of wanting to hire it out with the reality, which is in truth difficult. And it's difficult for 2 reasons. The main one is staffing it. Honestly, that is my main anxiety. And I might be many things, but you will honestly know the truth from me. I worry about that. I worry about not being able to give everybody what they want, but I have a job where constantly I have millions of stakeholders wanting lots of things all of the time. And the principle I always come back to is I must do my very best, as you have to do your very best, but it will never be perfect. So I suspect it will be that we will have to hire out in blocks of times that we can manage. Now, it so happens, because sometimes good things happen, that the current community use lays very comfortably with how we already open the sites. Whether we can do more and the summer holiday complicated, it is absolutely complicated. Do we have the desire to get it right in the contract? Yes. Can I use education money that is for the education of children to subsidise leisure for adults? No. And I need to make that really clear to the committee, because your responsibility is always to everyone. My specific responsibility must always be to children and young people. But children and young people have parents and they live in communities. And that's why there is a connection that is very comfortable with what we want to try and do. But Pauline, I think it's a point well made, and I welcome the fact that I can give you clarity. We can only do what we can do. But what we want to do is the most for most.
Tony, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, and Ginny, I think you touched on it there, and it's probably just reaffirming that you already do hire out other facilities during the evenings, weekends. So you potentially have got a staff member that obviously has to open and close school for that already. So that could be the crossover between the two.
Get there in the end. David.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I think we're in danger of straying into realms of hypotheticals at the moment. We can't predict the future. But that last few minutes conversation, I think, has been very helpful, because it lays bare, I think, the concerns that many of us had, that you can maybe be very willing and very obliging in the contracts that we sign, but ultimately it depends upon your ability to deliver, and that is not certain. I think the case for expanding the school is pretty certain, and we should support that. I think we are justifiably concerned about the ongoing provision of leisure facilities. We can take the assurances we've been given, but it may be something for this committee to consider as part of an annual review, that we look at how the various leisure facility contracts with schools is performing. My sense is these are we have an education need, which is take priority, which is right, and the Department of Wishful Thinking does tend to work a little bit overtime in terms of how the leisure facilities get maintained, and that may just be the way of the world and the way it goes on. But I think if I were, this is going to be my last scrutiny meeting, unfortunately, but if I was staying on the committee, I would certainly be wanting to be paying a lot more attention to how these various agreements with different schools across the borough work in terms of sharing or making use of the school's facilities for adult leisure.
Great. Morning. Charles was next, please.
Thank you. It's a very simple one. We're talking about 125-year lease. Yeah, but the building has a life of 20, 30 years, correct me if I'm wrong. So where does the burden for maintenance and replacing the building fall?
I would say as prescribed in the legal lease transfer, but Ginny will know better what that is than I.
Well, regretfully, the trust would have the ultimate responsibility for that. We enjoy, accept, cope with a certain amount of confirmed capital, which we have to look after for the whole of the estate, which the trust is responsible, and this would be part of that.
Did you have another question?
Yeah, it was just a tidying up question, really. We've been in receipt of emails from another school and also from ARC about various concerns. I just wanted to check that those had all been resolved.
I can just make a comment on that. I'd had the letter from ARC as well, and I'd had conversations to say that this would be part and parcel of the commitment that the trust makes, that we will have the engagement with from the council, with the trust, etc., to honour those commitments for those activities.
So is that you were aware of that?
Is that the disco, Pauline?
Yes.
Yeah, we think that's very important. Okay. Of course it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know about the other school though.
I don't know what exactly to confirm, but any school with any concern through, I just said the partnership getting stronger and stronger. I think I hope school leader agree to that. Any concern and issue we will address in a transparent way. Any teacher have any concern, I would like to come to meet with me. Let's talk about it. So my experience in the past few months here, I think that we always resolve the issue people have to address concern. Naturally, not everything is smooth sailing. People have some concern, whatever is about giving full reassurance. That question asked. People use it as reassurance. Yeah.
So, because I've had the same email that Pauline had. The school has misunderstood something it read in a newspaper report, and that has now been pointed out to them. It's very unfortunate, and it has led to a bit of argy-bargy on their part. But I think they thought that they were not going to get what they had been expecting, and that is not the case. They interpreted the newspaper article as meaning that it was St Crispin's and nobody else, and that's not the case. Other schools are still expanding exactly as has been given. The heads are all familiar with that through the Federation and the Borough Education Partnership.
Thank you, Prue. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, just my observation really, I don't know how many press today tonight listening into this. I read a couple of press reports, a lot of errors in it. So I would urge Chair, I think you press run report to check with what's been recorded in the committee, what recorded in the past. Otherwise, just stir up the unnecessary uncertainty. It's just my observations for press colleagues. Not colleague. I used to work with press. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Yes, thank you. Actually, half of what I was going to ask has been answered, which is good. In the business case that has been made for the operation of out of hours or out of school hours, has that been predicated upon a big increase in charges that people would already pay currently for the services? And the reason that I ask that is because my ward members who are big users of the area, of the school, of the site, sorry, are probably in the lowest income bracket in the area, and it would then disadvantage them further. I was looking at the equality impact assessment, which particularly mentioned mitigating that, and yet we've heard tonight that may or may not be able to happen. I'm sure I'm old enough and long enough in the tooth to know lots of promises over many years to make up for things that are going to be lost that never actually happen. So there is a bit of a responsibility I'm asking for from WBC to make sure that some of those mitigations actually take place. And if there is some comfort that you can give us that there will at least be some protection, maybe for a year or two before the prices shoot up of the facilities.
Probably best if Ginny responds to
that. I completely understand what you're saying. We understand there is a diversity of community, and the last thing we want to do is prevent people from being engaged. We have a particular responsibility to be stewards of good money practice. There is no intention. We're not a profit-making organisation. We are a charity, but equally, we cannot subsidise that space. Naturally, I am more than concerned about being careful about people's feelings over this, and we would have to be particularly careful about any change to costing. But I have to tell you, the costs that are now are what we hire the school for, so we know that works, so we have a comfort in there. So I don't think we'll be making an awful lot of money, and we have absolutely no intention to do that, but are very comfortable about a cap for a period of time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wasn't trying to suggest that that's what you want to do. By the way, you had a separate comment I'll make to you afterwards, maybe. But I think that it's just that if it requires extra income for places for leisure to make it work, admittedly the circumstances are changing, then I would obviously not expect you to be subsidising the use of that for the local community. That's just let me just make that clear. But what I would also say is, in an area of deprivation of the levels that we have, particularly in Norries, the first thing that suffers with that is health. And one of the gateways to dealing with some of those issues are easily accessible leisure facilities, which maybe they're not used well enough at the moment. Maybe they've not been best enough, but we have a really great new Director of Public Health and no doubt lots of programmes to go along with that. So I want you to bear that in mind in all of your deliberations about how this looks going forward.
I would just say we have a common view of that because, of course, families and their health and well-being and attendance at school and so on, perhaps there are some really advantageous moments of being able to build community links to make that easier to use. Because I think you're quite right, we do have a wonderful new Director of Public Health.
I've got a question I think might end up in your report, Graham. Currently, as a leisure centre, who actually pays for the maintenance and upkeep of that building? Who has that responsibility for repairs, etc.?
Shall I? Peter's going to answer that.
Yeah, I'll certainly attempt to, Graham. Thank you, Chair. It's split responsibilities, Chair. It depends on the fabric of the build. Structurally, it rests with the council. Internal workings will fall on the operator as well. So it does differ between different sites. So it's within the contract specification. And again, that's something which we'd need to address as part of the ongoing lease.
Okay, so my one question for that would be, with the transfer, would that responsibility for the fabric fall with the trust, or will it still be partially responsibility of WPC as a leaseholder?
My understanding, Chair, as Ginny's already alluded to, in terms of capital expenditure, that would rest with the trust. But again, that would be captured within the operating lease at transfer.
Thank you.
Perhaps it's worth explaining that when schools transfer from being maintained into being a trust, that is exactly what happens. Whatever the state of the buildings, we inherit them and we have the responsibility of improving them. And this is the point that trustees would make. We are stewards, but for a little time of these buildings. Ultimately, we need to return them better than when we receive them.
Thank you for that. Any more questions from the floor? So I have to think where we go from this next. So firstly, I'd like to give you a lot of thanks from the committee for turning up tonight and spoon feeding us. That's what we've needed to be. We needed to be spoon fed with the right information to be able to comment on this. And thank you for your time. And for members of the public that have all disappeared because they're bored with us, for their diligence and their patience with us as well. So takes me back to purpose of the report and the recommendations. So firstly, before we go down to actually say take any votes or anything, has anybody got any comments or recommendations that they would feel are worth adding to this meeting? So I'll start to right, left hand, right hand. Peter.
Really just with regards to Montague Park's mentioning, we have a lot of mention in there. I would like to see as part of the recommendation that we do start a formal process to actually bring that on board.
David.
I'd like to add the recommendation that this agreement plus a review of all of the other agreements we have across the borough between schools and leisure facility providers are brought back to this committee within, say, the next 12 months.
Even if that has to be part two.
Charles.
David has actually said exactly what I was going to say. So
that's 2A. Bill.
I only wanted to ask if there was a way to cap the 1 million contribution from WBC, or to make that a little bit more solid.
My understanding from documentation, that is what the offer is, what the contribution would be from WBC, but
That's correct, Chair.
I don't think there's that's it capped in that statement. There is no additional funding. That is the £1 million.
Right, so the circa could be taken out of all the documentation.
No, sorry, you lost me there.
Yes and no. I think, supposing it was £1,100,000. Yeah, yeah.
Any more items? And anybody else got anything to offer? Okay, so the recommendations that were in the documentation is that the committee consider the attached executive report and supplementary annex on the future of St Crispin's Leisure, make recommendations as appropriate to the executive meeting on the 30th of November. So we have 2 additional recommendations to make to offer, but our main item is the other information that has been presented to us from visitors, pardon me, from the trust and from the school, etc., from Place and Leisure. I'm trying to think how we form this vote. So luckily I've got someone that knows what they're talking about. So the item that I want to put to the vote in the committee is that we take forward the recommendations of this presentation, this documentation to the executive, with the caveats that we've identified that Montague Park is brought into the equation to be considered for improvements. Is that the correct terminology?
It's more about actually starting the formal process to bring it online.
Bring it online,
as opposed to hand waving.
Okay.
So, sorry, Chairman, it's about the financial viability assessment. That needs to happen first before the presumption of it will be brought online.
That's exactly what I meant.
So to explore the financial assessment of bringing it online.
To undertake the financial viability assessment.
And the second was that this and other agreements with schools be brought back to the committee for assessment in 12 months. Within 12 months? Within 12 months. Okay. So if I could take a seconder for that particular. Thank you, David. Those 4. Those against? And abstentions? Thank you. So that closes this particular agenda item. And again, thank you very much for your time. If you want to watch us do the rest of it, show you can, or you can take a run for the door.
Could I just, from this side anyway, thank
please
for all the presentations, because they did actually help quite a lot. So thank you for your time.
It was well worth you turning out. And I hope you get your cocoa on time. Why? It's long COVID. Okay, agenda item 70, the litter bins task and finish group. So the purpose of the report is, as we say at our meeting on the 2nd of October, the committee agreed to establish a task and finish group to scrutinise the provision and emptying of litter bins across the borough and to submit any recommendations to the council's executive. So the report sets out the draft terms of reference for the proposed task and finish group. So after our conversations, the recommendation that we'll be trying to aim for will be that the committee consider and amend as necessary the draft terms of reference set out in the report, determine which members will sit on the task and finish group using the council's proportionality rules, and consider the time frame for the task and finish group's deliberations. I would like to offer something against item 3. I don't think this is something that the task and finish group is going to achieve this side of any election or even possibly into late next year. So I think there's at least possibly a 12-month time frame at least before we can get something concrete from the task and finish group. So are we all on the same sort of frame of mind? Thank you. So it's the actual, we've had the background. Terms of reference. So, one item before, so a couple of considerations before we go into looking at terms of reference is that we have to consider that the consultation has already happened. So we had the results of the consultation, we've had the results of our own voting. We're not aiming for the task and finish group to go and rubber stamp what was already been effectively rejected. And we are looking for alternative solutions and to take other things into consideration. Pauline.
I think the thing that might be slightly missing from this for me, maybe it's just emphasis, is about options outside the litter bins and for actually saving money. So that doesn't have as enough emphasis on this terms of reference for me. Maybe that's just the way I'm.
I think that would be an item actually is good addition to the opportunity that the task and finish group will research is the opportunities for additional savings if they see within this framework of looking at this area. The other item that I will bring to this is the perception with the public of who's actually responsible for the bins and where they are. There are so many private developments that are effectively private. They're the leasehold environments where they've not been adopted, and the responsibility for supplying collection points, dog poo bins, etc. It doesn't fall within the council's responsibility because it's not adopted land. And there was, and I'm not going to name any individual, there was an item in social media where someone had walked through a park area and said, yes, there's no bins, there's no dog bins. It's a private area. It's under lease, so it's whose responsibility that is. So one thing I'd like to add into this is for the task and finish group is to actually explore the possibility of approaching planning to add this as an item in the planning. If the developers are not going to produce adoptable environments, that they have to be responsible for that. Now, in my own area, there are two dog bins and one public bin. The public bin is by a play area. The two dog bins are by where public rights of way exit the estate into green space. It's a perfect place to have it. But there is nothing that I've seen when I've walked around different estates to indicate that the developers take any responsibility for this sort of thing. Now, in taking that responsibility, placing those items, there's also the emptying of it. So again, that has to fall in. Unfortunately, it falls into a cost associated to the residents on their management fees, which is, again, something hopefully that with various things that are going on with the government, with the leasehold plans, etc., that we get some of these sort of things sorted out. And in the area where I'm paying a management fee contributions, it's entrenched in there that there's a fortnightly litter pick. So again, the management committee, the management agency is responsible for organising that with a ground clearance team. So they do a 2-weekly collection litter pick, and it's about enforcing those sort of things and positioning that sort of item into planning. Tony.
Whilst we're on that subject, the other thing to bear in mind is quite a lot of the town councils have bins, and it occurs to me that having been through the litter bin argument, that the allocation of bins is not very even across the borough, and that some places that should have one don't. I'm wondering also if we should look at some, I don't know whether you should badge them or what you should, but it's not always clear whose bin these are. And I agree with point 5, which is to see if we can get some arrangement with the towns and parishes so that, we all want the same thing in the end, which is less litter and places for people to put it. So again, I think more closer working with the towns and parishes would be really good. And I think the final thing is dealing with the fly tipping. I don't know about you, but we get quite a lot of fly tipping in bins in Early, where people, for various reasons that I can't understand, either put their blue bags in the litter bin, or large volumes of takeaway containers and that sort of stuff that probably come from a company. So I think also one of the things we need to look at is the enforcement of fly tipping in litter bins, because I don't think we're necessarily enforcing it, or at least it doesn't appear to be.
Yeah, I'm not too sure how that would work, how that would go, but I do agree with the sentiment entirely.
Well, it's the same what they used to do. What they used to do is, if they found people filling litter bins with bags of rubbish, they'd have a little look to see where it came from. If it all came from the local restaurant, then they'd go around and talk to them and say, this is not what litter bins are for. Litter bins are for litter, not for, your excess waste if you don't want commercial waste. And I think, I don't know if they still do that, but I think we could look at that as well.
Please, Charles.
Thank you. Forgive me if my memory's playing tricks on me, but there's nothing about Countryside Services here on what they're doing about bins. I think any review of bins on a wider level needs to at least consider that briefly.
Yeah. So you can expand upon what that actually means. I'm not being ignorant. I'm just trying to get my head around things.
Well, thinking it's actually in David's ward, but very near mine, California Country Park. There are lots of public bins there, but there needs to be some consideration of the when they're all being emptied. I mean, one would think for the council there'd be contractual savings if it was all done the same way anyway. So from a financial point of view and an operational point of view for the council and for the customer, basically the resident, if you walk off Gorse Ride, why are we putting bins there if you're like 2 minutes from the country park? You see what I mean? It all needs to be considered together.
I mean, the other side of that as well would be who's provisioning those. That as a business, the country park's responsible for their bins, etc. It's whether or not, like you say, is it another?
Country parks are not a business; they're just another department in the council. The problem is that, same with highways and parking, and this is not a political point at all, by the way, the management of parking in the country parks and bins, it appears, in the country parks is completely separate from highways everywhere else and parking everywhere else and bins everywhere else. And that makes no sense at all. So
just to give a point with that, if you want to report an issue with a bin, you can only do the highways online. You can't do the Countryside Service one. So there's a disparity.
So
we could do that might save some money rather than getting rid of bins, for example.
That's also a piece with communication, and I was helping my wife, who's a town councillor, look at bins around Leslie Sears playing field. And despite the obvious fact that my life had taken a turn for the tragic, we ended up counting about 10 or 12 bins, which were some were Countryside, some were Woking Town, some were WBC, some were dog bins. And none of that was apparent to the average passer-by. I think if we're going to communicate what we're doing, we do need to actually have some clarity of who's providing what sort of service and why.
So that will be the evidence from the council. So what we need to do is take, as I say, item 4 is definitely going to be piece on. Consider the evidence from the council contractors. So it's about getting who those contact personnel staff will be from the officers to find out how those contracts and contractors work, and see whether there's an opportunity to get them to liaise and look at those sort of things. Best practice across the country. Yeah, we all like Cornwall, but is it the best place to look? There's no bins because it's all countryside until you get into Newquay.
So could I suggest we maybe add a couple more things to the terms of reference, which are looking at streamlining the council's activities around bin emptying and bin provision, in order to make it as efficient as possible and as understandable as possible. So I think that would be another one. I think we need another one to look at the enforcement of fly tipping around bins, and the final one is to look at alternative areas of saving. That helps.
Chair, my suggestion was going to be the countryside service point could be picked up by just a simple extension to number 5 to consider opportunities for improved partnership with town and parish councils and with other WBC departments like countryside services.
Chair, I'll just point out that early town council already ahead of the game here because they've already passed a resolution that early town council refuses the request from Woking Borough Council that the town council funds the emptying of litter bins identified for removal in early. So they've already decided not to do this.
On the basis of the current offer, I think. Yeah. If an advised offer, maybe they'll think differently.
When we come to the fly tipping item, do we want to restrict that activity, that particular agenda item there, to just the bin areas? Just the bin areas, thank you, because I do have a resident who I'm trying to assist who has a neighbour in a private estate who has a building business, and he uses the parking spaces to dump his rubble, and when he's got enough, then he hires the skip. So you've got that sort of activity that is not, yeah. The other one on there, I'm just trying to see, is an engagement with local businesses. It's about, the big ones like McDonald's and Burger King and etc. They've all got their own bins. They've all got their own clearance facilities, etc. And they keep it in their local area. They are looking after their street and their own patch. The difficulty comes when we have major events like Reading Football Club and others. I won't stick just to them, but where we do have a large footfall and we have a lot of rubbish that ends up being strewed into the streets, etc., on the way out and on the way in. So it's about education, because we're never going to go and get something like Reading Football Club to say, right, you've got to go and provide 50 litter pickers every time you have a football match to go and clear up the local streets. It'd be great if they did, but it's not going to happen. It would be nice if it did, if it could, but I don't think they'll ever do it. But we do have to look at the education side of things and where that goes.
Following on from that, I can't remember exactly where it ended up, but I used to look after licensing at one point, and there was Remenham Regatta and the Henley Regatta and those fields around there, and I got a feeling they were being asked to litter pick that. So I don't know, I might be wrong, so please don't quote me.
No, I think you're right, because I used to live down at Bromhouse Gifford, so I know the patch,
Yeah.
and they've been in.
So I wouldn't necessarily write off Reading Football Club completely. And I think the issue with places like McDonald's, for example, is they've got their bins and they're litter picking around their own area. What they need to do is pick them a burger distance eating away, not right at the shop. And some of the planning permissions on McDonald's, the one in Early, for example, had a requirement of McDonald's to actually provide a litter picking service. So again, there might be something that goes into planning as well about how to make people who create waste help deal with the people that dispose of it irresponsibly.
Yeah, that is one of the items that. I mean, a lot of it's recyclable, so they're not recycling it either. That's another issue.
I mean, it's another small example, but there's a shop in the area that I represent. There's a pizza shop, and there's a bin outside, which is quite a small bin. So it only needs about one pizza box on the top of the bin, and it's inverted commas full. So there's something about the size and nature of bins in certain locations as well.
I certainly feel that if a facility like that, a fast food outlet, is providing outside space to consume their goods, that they should be responsible in that outside space in the immediate area.
Our ASB team are speaking to them about it. I mean, it might be that they provide a larger bin, for example.
Yeah. Now, pizzas are round. Why can't we just do round boxes? They just go in a nice round bin. Just crush them. Harder to fold. So if we go down the terms of referencing, to consider council's current approach to provision and emptying of litter bins, and in that will be, I think this is that particular area is also about we do that liaison between the different departments that have responsibilities for bins. That's investigated and streamlining. Sorry. Item 2 then is to consider the detailed evidence from the 2023 public consultation on changes and potential savings relating to the street cleaning and grounds maintenance services. Now, although we say the consultation has finished and there were those things, I would still like to understand or hope that the task and finish group would be given an opportunity to be helped to understand what the officers were actually aiming to do and whether any of that information that they've gathered for areas that need to change. So again, it's about bins in the right places. That's one of the items in there, I think, because there's plenty of areas where there's not enough bins, and when that is identified, it's then identifying who has responsibility. And so we do need I don't know which department's going to give us the feedback, but outside of the commercial areas, outside of the towns, when we start going into the urban areas and the streets, etc., different for the Woodleys and Earleys, it's long established. For the new developments in Shinfield, etc., it's not. So we don't really have a good grasp of which are adopted and which aren't. So having a better picture, a map of the area of the borough, and to identify where the responsibilities are, so we don't go and creep into the wrong places, and where we do find. Where the task and finish group do find that there is a need, that we correctly identify whose responsibility it is, rather than it just all come back into here and push costs up.
I don't know whether we've already got that on the overlays on the maps, because we certainly got which streetlights are ours. I just wonder if somebody could do the same with which bins are ours, so that we actually know, because I think we seem to have everything else identified.
Well,
be one, I would have thought.
I consider that from the activity that was done, that they should have. Otherwise,
they wouldn't know how to empty them, would they?
So there must be something that they can come up with. Yeah, but it's not just about identifying what are ours now. It's identifying which areas we are not servicing well, and when we look at areas and overall which areas aren't being serviced well, that are not our responsibility, and that's going to be a more difficult thing to identify who is responsible. So it's a bit late to go and chase developments that are already done, but we definitely want to make sure that we curtail that now by putting that effort into the recommendation to planning, that from the future it is a planning consideration. If the bins become adopted because the site becomes adopted, fine. But if they're not put there in the first place, then there's nothing for then the complaint comes along. So I think that's something we to consider. So that was consider the views of stakeholders, residents, community groups, and town and parish council. So we know what the town and parish council feel. They do put their own bins out a lot. Evidence of the contractors, opportunities. Examples of best practice across the country. Where are we going to get that from? So that's a question that goes towards the relative department to see if we can get the yeah, other than driving around the country and looking for a clean space, I don't think we're really going to be able to identify exactly where a good space is unless Marie-Louise.
Sorry, yeah, I mean, we cannot be the only council who is facing this situation. So there must be some examples of councils that are in a similar situation. It would be worth looking at what they have done. And what's worked and of course what hasn't worked. It would be nice if we could learn from other people's failures rather than making our own. So we could look at the local government association or whatever. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you could use to look at because this is something, I mean, it is as we talked about at length last time, it is one of like the core and most visible functions of local authorities. And I'm sure other people have been in the situation that we found ourselves in last time.
Thank you. Absolutely. Consider potential campaigns to support behavioural change. The one thing about potential campaigns to support behaviour change is to look where the change needs to occur. So we are looking for some evidence within the borough of where there are hotspots and see if we can identify what causes those to be hotspots. If it's a leisure park facility where everybody's bringing the bags of food in, etc., well, if you brought it in a bag, you could take your rubbish home in a bag. That's an educational thing that we've got to try to improve, rather than having to over provision bins in recreational areas because there's a lot of rubbish being generated. Well, you bought it in a box, take home in a box. Bought it in a bag, take home in a bag. Pardon me. Some people will not want to be educated. Habits are hard to break, unfortunately, but it's a trend that we hope that the task and finish group can maybe find some identify something that starts a trend. The anti-social, so that's the carrot. The carrot isn't, if you keep your street clean, we're going to give you £5 off your council tax. Unfortunately, we can't do that. But we don't want to then, in the same instance, we don't want to go out with a big stick saying if you don't pick it up, you're going to get a £100 fine. I mean, it's bad enough. Well, say it's bad enough. It's obvious enough that dog littering is a £100 fine. But how many times does that actually occur? How many fines are actually issued? It's a very hard thing to prosecute, I would say. It's you're not going to go and do the DNA test, follow them home and do a DNA test on what you picked up in the street with the dog. And the problem is that it falls on the public. I do know that the only way you, as a member of the public, you can get something is if you follow the person home and you find out where they live. So you've got an address. Unless you've got an address, you can't do anything. And if you start following people home, you're the ones who are likely to get a tap on the shoulder and put in the wrong sort of wagon. So you're likely to find the Marie.
Sorry, there is, I mean, from our discredited friends in the behavioural economics area, there are quite a lot of studies that I know from, I mean, they're from big cities in Germany, but like about how nudges and things were brought to change habits and in tune with things around recycling, whatever. So there is quite a lot of literature, and we also have the expertise of the University of Reading, because like they have, departments who have studied this. I know at least 2 people who are working on very similar areas. So there is like local expertise that we could also look at, because I agree fines aren't great, but there are, I don't mean that we have to sort of, well, I mean, there are lots of things that have been tried in other countries. I know a lot in Sweden that we could again look at, and there is that local expertise here as well.
I think you're talking yourself into a position. Opportunities for commercial sponsorship of litter bins, e.g. shops and food outlets. So one of the things that comes to my mind here is, if it's a nice tidy litter bin and it's a nice tidy space, a shop will be happy to sponsor a bin. But if it ends up being the bin of hell, they're not going to want their logo on it. So we do have a difficulty there. But if it was a bin outside their property, outside the commercial property, closer to there, where it actually made some sense to have their advertising on, then we may be able to encourage some local businesses to improve. So that would be a case of, again, finding if there are places that need additional bins or move bins, etc. If there is a business there that could partake in that process. David.
I mean, just talking about litter from source, it would be interesting if we could ever find out what portion of stuff we're seeing blown around the streets is actually being chucked out of car windows rather than people missing bins. I mean, you get the impression just by looking at the average height and verge. So this is some people casually chucking a crisp packet aside. It's coming out of a white van somewhere or whatever as people are driving around. How you do that, I don't know. It might be possible to do some sort of a few pinpoint study just to get a sense of it. Because then trying to understand what problem we're solving.
I quite agree with that. That there is that the travelling rubbish, the stuff that isn't dropped, it's thrown out. The other one would be the activities that occur. So we do know that when the bin collections are done, there's bound to be stuff that gets blown in the wind. It does come up. The other one would be there are places that are being used for car swaps, car changes, etc. So in my area, they don't use Mere Oak, they use our streets, and there'd be cars parked there for over the weekend because they've got all gone in one car and gone off to Wales or something. When they come back, there's cups and things thrown out. So you get those events or activities that are going on that generate rubbish as well. So yeah, it would be a good idea to find out. But again, when you do see that rubbish, you know where the real source is, the vendor that supplied it, but you don't know how it got there in the first place, how far away that vendor's option is. Pauline.
Can we just be careful we don't end up scope creeping this a bit too much? Got to remember why we started this, which was the ill-judged removal of 150 litter bins and the resulting mess all over the place. I agree with you about people chucking stuff out of cars, but I don't think that's within the scope of this. I think we need to keep to what options have we got apart from removing litter bins, whatever they are, and are our litter bins in the right place, and are we operating our bits of our council and the town councils properly to make sure that we're as effective as possible, and are people putting stuff in our litter bins that they shouldn't be? I think that should be the scope. I think if we start going into people chucking stuff out of cars and fly tipping in non-litter bin areas and that sort of stuff, we're going to end up trying to solve the whole waste problem if we're not careful. I'm just a bit nervous about that.
I think that particular topic is all about education. It's not about provisioning. I don't think we should provision alternatives, and we shouldn't be adding to the costs. Definitely shouldn't be. But I think at the education side of things, if we've got the visibility of that sort of activity going on, that there is something to say, at least, whatever we do, you can't stop every motorist in the street saying, have you got any rubbish in your car? Can you make sure you take it home? But the rubbish police, that'd be great. But on the other side of things, it's not about turning around to the public saying, if you see something being thrown out of a car, take the number plate, send a photograph and the number plate. We can't go down that sort of road, but we can. It'd be great if we could, but it's bad enough stopping the noise. But what we can do is to add that to the educational element of what we want to put out.
And it being part of the education, I just don't want to end up trying to solve the wrong problem.
It's not going to be possible. Neil, Alistair, sorry.
We ought to note that groups like Adopt a Street do exist across the whole borough, don't they? I think it's the whole borough, don't they? So I mean, they're not specifically listed in here, but they are organised litter pickers who allocated streets to everyone. And I mean, one of their problem with things like, the state of the A33, which is like a litter stream, is that you can't go and litter pit down these main roads. So, they need to be closed, don't they, to be able to have litter picking teams. But I don't know who organises that.
That's highways, because that's definitely A33 and etc. I know what you mean, because it all ends up on the grass, on the greenery, up the trees, and as you drive down, all you see is this multicoloured tree. I didn't know they were red and blue. I thought they were all green. It does blight the land. Actually, I didn't think anything would fetch down the A33 because we all speed down there so much. But there you go. So the Adopt a Street and the volunteer pickers, definitely that we should involve them in a conversation with the task and finish group, because they've got the feet on the ground. They know what the good patches are, the bad patches are, etc. So having that feedback means, yes, we have got eyes on the street. We can go and ask that particular team about where they think the hotspots are. So I'm try and find it a little bit difficult now to add this. So if we go down and see what we want to put as an amendment then. So item 1 was to consider council's current approach to provision of empty litter bins and to look at streamlining the procedures. We do need to, item 2, yes, we do need task management group to take note of the public consultation and the savings related to street cleaning on the grounds maintenance services, and identify why those areas were picked on. There may be genuine reasons why actually they could still accommodate, if there's 5 bins all in the same little area, who owns all those bins? If we've got this duplication of effort between town and borough, does it need to happen? Some of it may be boundary change. I don't know. There could be all sorts of reasons why we get too many bins in one place and not enough in another. And if one of those items will be in there that if there is still identified certain bins that need to that could be moved out of where they are over provision, can they be repositioned to areas where they are of more use, not just a case of moved and gone, but is there an opportunity for them to be put to better use? Item 3, then consider the views of local stakeholders, residents, community groups and town and parish councils. That will include the Dr. Street team. Volunteer pickers. Or is to consider evidence from the council's contractors. I think that's straightforward enough. It's just about identifying who the contractors are. Consider the opportunities for improved partnership working with town and parish councils. And I forgot what it was. There was another item added to that. Countryside. What? Sorry. Service. I've got countryside in there. I couldn't think what else was supposed to go in there. Consider examples of best practice across the country. Louise, you've got contacts in low places, high places. No.
A colleague of mine did the thing with the green footprints in Copenhagen, where they painted green footprints on the ground leading towards a litter bin, and that reduced littering by 29%, which was actually quite impressive for the price of. So that's the sort of thing. Sorry, that I would.
No, that's ideas in action. That works for me. And so we put different arrows on the ground in different colours to say this is where the red tube station is and that's where the brown one is, and you don't know where it's going to go. You just know you've got to follow that line. So yes, if you've got the ideas of the footprints, I think that's a good idea.
Sorry.
And also that was to first examples across the country and consult the LGA. Item 7 when there was to consider potential campaigns to support behaviour change, prevent litter and increase antisocial behaviour enforcement. So that is a case of finding the right people to talk to, how that sort of campaign would be doing. So we need some budding artist, people with brains bigger than mine to think of different ways of putting the message across, and where that will be targeted. I mean, schools is the ideal place. That's one captive audience. They can't get away from it. We're going to stick it in their face and they're going to have a look at this. Don't do so and so.
With regards to that, let's work with the town and parish councils, I think, because I know Wokingham did a whole bunch of stuff with schools on that and it was very successful.
Sorry, item 8 is to consider opportunities for commercial sponsorship of litter bins, e.g. shops and food outlets. Well, we have the majors that we have in our mind that do it anyway. It's about expanding their responsibility if it's possible. So we're looking at expanding their area of responsibility. The local footprint. And then the other thing that I would put in there, it's again, it's for the task and finish group to take on board, is a possibility of looking at where bins are, if they're near outlets that are already there, that already have a responsibility, whether or not they are prepared to sponsor, put a logo in. I wouldn't necessarily say, can we make them responsible for emptying it? It's whether or not that bears fruit. But there are other smaller food outlets that don't take that activity. They don't put cups out, bins outside to take the cups from Costa, etc., to recycle them, because a lot of what is recyclable ends up in a rubbish bin, and that's it. It's going to go in a bin. We don't have enough multi-use bins. Some of the parish councils do. Shinfield does. They've got out these multi faceted bins that take recyclables, etc., and general waste. But again, some of those get abused because they're on a out and away place that isn't regularly visited. So it's about collection times. Again, that would be about how the contractors work, how they assess when bins are going to be, see if whether the collection, the emptying cycle is adequate. And then that was an item that we added. I'm adding it 10 as streamlining collection activities between the different departments. Yes, add that as an item 10. So that moves 9, 10 and 9 down. 9 becomes 10, 10 becomes 9. So the last one on there would be to produce a final report to the executive. Now, in there somewhere, we have to put in how we deal with fly tipping of bins. That's an item that I need to consider. And that again would be the street cleaning teams, the volunteer teams. They're probably got a better eye on which bins end up being fly tipped most. I think they've got a good view of it, so we need to take their input in.
I think the other two are something around a recommendation to planning for new developments.
New development planning.
And also for new fast food outlets.
Yeah.
And then the final one was the alternative savings that might be found.
So new developments and new food outlets, responsibilities and provision. The last one then was if the team could find alternative areas of savings within this topic of the litter bins and rubbish collection. Yep.
Not just litter bins.
No. Well, the problem is alternative areas of savings means if we just say that without narrowing it down to the task that we're asking them to do, means it's too open.
No, I was thinking in terms, it comes back to the example of the streamlining of environment and leisure. You know, that could be a good saving that
so if we,
it's not a litter bin saving, it's a general saving.
So if we say alternative areas of savings within the above terms of reference. Okay, so we've added 4. How do we do this? Because I've written it down here, but we need to get this into the minutes somehow.
I'll write them up and check them with you.
Yeah, please. So are we happy with what we discussed? Is there anything else that anybody would like to add to it? No. So of course the next thing is we're looking for volunteers. That's number 1. I know it's going to change, but it could well change. Individuals could not be here. I could be sitting on a beach finally saying, yeah, Pauline.
Bearing in mind this is an item of interest to probably all councillors, not just the scrutiny committee, maybe we should actually take it back to the individual groups and see if anybody's particularly interested in doing it.
I do think that I did look for volunteers at the council meeting last time, and I got a lot of looks over my shoulder. What? So, yeah, I think it is a case of we'd like to look for volunteers within the council group. There are officers that are definitely going to have a good impact and a lot of input. We can't co-opt them on as such, but we do need to identify a core group within the various areas. So that's something else we've got to go and investigate. But yes. So we're agreed on the terms of reference. We'll get it back and make sure again that we're happy. We'll put it back into the pot again and make sure that what we changed here, it fits to what we think it should do. We do have a list of proposed witnesses in there anyway. So it's executive members and officers, residents, community groups, town and parish councils, best practice examples from local authorities, WBC's contractors and specialist groups. So there may be external specialist groups like Keep Britain Tidy that we want to involve as well, because they will have a handle on what's best in the country, what works well, and they may be able to identify places that are good examples, etc. So we're agreed on that. And as we say, the volunteer side, if there are any volunteers that wish to put their hands up and dive into the bin now, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Marie-Louise. And then we will, yes, I'm not. And then we will put this out to the wider audience to look for volunteers. And if we can't, then let's think. When's our next meeting?
19th of December.
19th December. So by the 19th of December, somebody will either have volunteered or they'll be getting a Christmas present because they've been co-opted in, they've been press ganged. So that's what we're looking at for. So if we'll take that.
Do you want to agree the size of the task and finish group? You normally have 4-3 or 3-2, something like that. Of
yes.
To be clear, I think it'd be good. There are people who are particularly interested in this and have got particular awards that are particularly significant. So, and we also need geographic spread across the borough.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit of a design thing. You need at least 5 people, probably 4 or 5. I think would be my view.
The split would be 3-2 if it's 5, or it's going to be 4-3 if it's 7, and with 1 in. So we're looking at 5. We're looking at 5 members in total. Okay, so we're looking.
If you ended up with any more than that, you'll never get anything done.
We want reserves. So it's how we get that democratic spread across the borough as well. So it is a case of we're looking to sort of look at the map, draw some artificial lines, say these are the 5 areas, and find a member in one of those 3 or 4 walled areas that falls into that area. Is that okay? So if we did an artificial line on a map for 5, create 5 segments, and then look for pigeonholing certain volunteers. Yeah. No comment. I'm going to be diplomatically neutral. Pardon me. Okay. So, thank you, Marie-Louise, for volunteering, putting your first name on it, and yeah, and you have the right to nominate if we don't get enough volunteers. I pass the buck. Okay. So are we, first off, with what we've discussed, it can be very hard to discuss everything again to say can we vote on it, but are we happy then that as a committee we have considered, we've made our amendments to the drafts, we haven't determined which members will sit on the task and finish group because we want to take it to the wider audience, and we have considered the time frame. So are we all in agreement? Thank you. What is the next one? So next item on the agenda is our forward plan. And we are going to add into that the formation of the task and finish group for the 19th. Are we okay with that? And at that meeting, we will have 5 yellow vests and we will supply them to our volunteers. 22nd of January. Ooh, that is a busy programme.
So I think there's too much on there, so we'll have to think about how we either whittle it down or putting an extra meeting next year.
There may be items in there that don't come forward.
Maybe we could ask for a written report on some of them. For instance, the violence against women and girls strategy. We've already had it. What we were asking for was an update. So it might be, because I think that my recollection was there were two issues with that. Firstly, it was a bit unspecific about what they were actually going to do. And so I think we asked them for more specific actions that they were going to take. And so asking them for what they decided plus an update on what they've done would be probably good enough, to be honest, in my view.
We're all okay with that, to take a written report for that item?
Can we be very specific about what we want, which is concrete actions planned and delivered? Planned and concrete actions delivered.
If Narinda's coming in for another item on the same day.
Chair? Do we have any danger of the budget coming back? Because we did on last January we did. This January we did.
So I think that's right. I think there's normally a budget sort of conclusion and summary item. So that, again, may need a further meeting in January.
It's whether we look at meeting the following week, which is going to be the very end of January, beginning of which we've already got one in March, January, February, March, or it's going to be February. The first week in February is the next one after, the next slot afterwards.
The problem with that, you're starting to butt up against the actual budget council meeting.
Yeah.
So really, you're talking about mid-January.
So you asked. So we're looking for an earlier meeting rather than a later meeting. So we're looking for a gap the week before.
Before we go galloping down that, could I just be clear about what the Enforcement and Safety Service actually is? Because I'm not sure I am.
Can I suggest that I just get a bit more detail on all these items and go and check whether or not they're actually coming in January, and then talk to the chair and vice chair? Because you're right, they are very brief descriptions at the moment.
Yeah, and the only enforcement I know about is planning enforcement, and I don't think Narinda's going to be talking about that, so it must be something else. I still think the violence against women and girls, I'd be happy with actions planned, actions taken. I personally don't want a long and complicated report of it without any tangible things in it.
So if we consider there's going to be another item that's going to turn up, then we would be looking at modifying this meeting in January, 22nd of January, to lose 2 or 3 items or have a written. So yes, we do need to go and find out more detail about these and see whether or not we can whether they will fit into a shorter meeting the week before.
Or not.
Depends if the written response is going to be good enough. If because again we still have to look at that and consider the content of it. So it's not just get a written one and that's it. We still need to consider what's in there. So we've still got to find some time to look at it and respond within the group. Yeah, let's just do that first item then. If Neil, if you could arrange to see if you get us some more enlightenment to some of these topics as to what the content might be, so we can work out what the time frame is going to be. Don't know if there's any pressing cut-offs or anything for any of these particular items, whether there's a commitment to deliver something on a certain date time that has to be done, and so we can't move it, but we'll look at that and forward it out as an email to everybody so that we're all on the same page. Okay. So 4th of March.
Sorry, Chair, can I just please make sure we've got a minute or action for the budgetary?
Yeah.
With regard to the 4th of March, Chair, may I ask the combating, maybe a question for Neil, but historically I thought combating drugs came to the Health and Wellbeing Board.
I'm still blaming Callum for these items. So again, I'll go away and check whether that's correct.
Are we going to learn anything about the police and fire services that we haven't heard directly from the likes of the Chief Constable not more than a week ago?
I think the only thing that might come out of that is how successful they've been over Christmas with the policy, with the activities they said they were going to kick off. I think that's the only thing that really comes out of that. I can't see the government suddenly turn around saying that they've got to ask us for more money and they can do things like that.
The only thing of interest of that one is last year when we had them come and talk to us, we actually had input on their proposed restructuring, and it would be interesting to see a year on how that restructuring has developed and whether our concerns have actually are irrelevant or have occurred.
So that was the meeting that time last year.
This year.
This year. So we need to look at the minutes, etc., to see what was said on there, and then draw up some conclusions as to what we want to target. And with the questions, yeah. Please, Polly.
If you want to defer something, you might think about deferring flood risk management, because it's a bit late looking at it in March. You might want to look at it in August or so before we end up back in another flood. But by March, it's probably a bit late for them to do anything.
By then, I know how good it was.
The worst flood we've had.
Well, we'll know that anyway.
Highways and customer service item. Is this the one? I'm just trying to remember now. Yes, this was me requesting. So this is about us finding out whether or not the activity of preventative road maintenance has been successful, whether the new process. So that's a fairly short statement, I think, in there that will just evidence of, are there more potholes than last year, or is it genuinely removed or reduced the amount of damage? David?
I think it was more wide ranging than that, Chris, actually, wasn't it? This was about how the highways team responded to requests and how generally they interacted with the public other than hiding under their desks.
My recollection of this item last time we heard it was more like an hour and a half than brief.
Yeah.
It was certainly not brief.
Been here that long that I can't remember everything, and I am not remembering everything. Or actually, or was it the case that I was in Oman last year? I've got to book my workload better. Yeah, again, I think in there we need to have a review of the 4th of March, how big some of these topics might be. So we are looking at both of these and both these work packages to get a feel of how big these topics are and how much time they're likely to take to, because we've got to give it decent amount of time. We can't just say you've all got 10 minutes and that's it. Yeah. Okay, so that's an action for myself and Peter with Democratic Services to have a look at that and get some responses. Okay. Action tracker, agenda item 72. So that's where that combating drugs partnership item comes into it then. It's an item on there that we called it in for March 24. Any comments about page 21? They're not being wiped out. The completed items and things like this, yeah. I mean,
no, there's one for October 2023. Schedule item on the local plan update. That's been done because it's on the forward plan.
But then it's ongoing. What's the ongoing one? Oh,
that's the next one. And then arts and culture strategies in September, according to this, but I don't know if it's been scheduled or not. So I would suggest scheduled item on the local plan update is now completed because you have scheduled it.
Yeah.
And the arts and culture strategy, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I suggest rather than do it now that Neil has a good hard look at them and make sure how many of them he can set as completed, because I think he can set quite a few of these completed.
Yeah. If it's possible now to maybe take Callum's original list and archive the ones that are completed onto a separate page.
Yep.
So that we've only got the ones that are upcoming or ongoing. So we get a better view of what we're looking for. Okay, thank you. Right. Any further comments on anything in the? Nope. Okay. Thank you all. Not been too long.